This video is to try and help people who might want to take on the shutter curtain repair on a Leica IIIf. It's probably applicable to some other Leica IIIs. I have replaced shutter curtains on other cameras, but never before on a Leica. This is the level of disassembly that I got to pretty much following YouTube videos. Thank you to other people that post those. There's also a video that shows how to remove the slow speed escapement, which you'll need to do. And actually we end up taking off the rangefinder, which is operated by that lever that I'm pressing here. But I'll dwell in this shot a little bit on what the looking in the front of the camera looks like with these rollers. There's a large roller on the left that moves the front shutter curtain, and then there's two rollers on the right. The nearest one, as we look at it here, is the sprung roller with the ribbons for that front curtain. And you can see my front curtain there is in pretty bad condition. It doesn't look too bad until you shine a light through it, and then it's completely unserviceable. What you see here are the baffles in place, so you can't see the whole of the shutter curtain, but you can see its operation. And I'm operating it by moving the speed setting dial. You know that when you press the shutter release, the speed setting dial rotates along with that drum, the large roller, and that's convenient to operate the curtains during this repair process, because of course as you can see, I've removed the advance spool. You can see the condition of the curtains isn't great, but actually the condition of the ribbons was like new. Just here you can see the rear curtain ends its travel just about a millimeter sticking out from the frame opening, which is good to note. Actually, I wasn't going to replace, I decided at this point not to replace the ribbons, so they remained correctly positioned to result in that location for the new curtains that I was going to install. You can see that the two laths, the aluminum laths at the end of the curtains and the ribbons are exactly overlapping. Now I did have to go to some trouble to get the baffles out. The first two baffles come out easily, but to get the last baffle, the large baffle, out, you have to remove the slow speed escapement, which there's guides online, but you have to remove quite a few pieces from the bottom, and also the top to remove a bracket that gets in the way of the baffle and actually also holds the third baffle in place. But also you have to remove the gear that sits in that small shroud at the bottom right of the camera, and I had to remove the rangefinder to get at those screws. So by the time I was done with this, it was a pretty advanced state of disassembly, but I believe that is absolutely necessary if you're going to replace the curtains. So you can get a better view here with slightly better lighting and hopefully better focus of the lath overlap. You see they're overlapping exactly as they make their way across the scene there. So what you can see here is the front curtain rolled up on the large drum, and that's where it ends with the shutter cocked. So you can see the rear curtain that someone's had to go up fixing before me with some liquid rubber, but that's in pretty bad shape. It's wrapped around that rear of the two smaller drums, and that's a sprung drum. As you can see, the laths move over the scene together. So I tried to cut the curtains off the laths with a knife, but I found actually a pair of scissors was the best way of doing this. I got so far across and then decided to just put in a pair of tweezers so I didn't lose the lath. I don't think it will actually wrap around the drum, but I put a pair of tweezers in, it stopped it wrapping around, and then I pulled it out and bonded it. Actually, I just put a piece of tape to hold it out the way. And the curtain, this is the front curtain now. I'm just showing where it ends on the drum. The adhesive is a pretty telltale sign of how long your curtains need to be, but I'll show you some dimensions as we go forward as to how long to make the curtains. Since I'm not replacing the ribbons, the length of the curtains wasn't actually that critical to me. So then I turned my attention to the rear curtains and cut that curtain off the lath. I didn't figure out a convenient way of stopping it wrapping around that sprung roller. By the way, you can see on the right of the camera here, I've attached the front lath to the camera with a little bit of tape, just to hold it out the way and stop it wrapping around that tape there. But here's my rear curtain wrapped around the sprung roller. I pull against that, and most of the adhesive stayed on the roller, but some of it came off on the curtain, and you can see the brass roller exposed where the adhesive comes off. I had to clean that roller up with a craft knife in a similar way to how I cleaned up the laths here to remove the residue from the curtain material. I didn't use new ribbon in this repair, but I do have some from the same supplier that I got this rubberized silk from, and I've got the supplier's name up on the screen now. The measurements I found online, but actually when I came to measure the actual old curtain, its width was a little bit different from the 31mm I found online, so it measured 31.75 in width, so that's what I made mine, and it worked out great. I marked the ribbon up, the curtain up with a ballpoint pen, and made sure everything was cut parallel, and then made my two curtains. I actually made the rear curtain 80mm and the front curtain 105mm, and then later cut them down a few millimeters, so they ended up being the dimensions I put on the screen a moment ago. And in each case I found using scissors with this material was easier than a craft knife for me, and that's what I'm doing here, just cutting the front curtain to length. We're onto the rear curtain now, and I found it convenient to set up this business card. Actually taped it to the frame of the camera so I could conveniently locate the laths and the curtain in the correct position. And I actually switch over to the front curtains, but I did exactly the same procedure. I won't show both of these procedures, but I did the same procedure for both the front and the rear curtains, and that is I tape down the lath in the correct position onto the business card, and then put the curtain underneath. I later, in the next step, fold over the curtain, but I did this in 2 steps, and I find that a good approach. It takes a bit longer, but just doing one step at a time with this adhesive reduces the stress level a little bit. So I could just focus in this step on getting the curtains in the right place on the lath and perpendicular to it, and positioned correctly. And then I came back later, put some more adhesive on and folded over the curtain to finish the attachment job, the job of attaching the curtain to the lath. This Super X adhesive goes off pretty quick, which I think is why I'm struggling to draw a line of adhesive on the rubberized surface of the front curtain here. But once I'd done that, I could pull that curtain underneath the lath and of course just position it exactly where I want it to be. I used a pair of tweezers to just help smear that that adhesive around, and also you might be able to see in the picture here that there's some witnesses of the old curtain on the lath, and I could move the new curtain around so it aligned precisely with the witness, there you are, of the old curtain. I just pressed down a little bit on the lath to make sure it was going to bond fine, and just left it overnight. And then I came back the next day, and actually at the bottom of the picture here, amongst all the other pieces of the camera, you can see I've folded over that end of the curtain, held it in position actually with an eraser and a clamp, a sprung clamp, and I left that for a few hours before I came back and continued with the next steps. So I did those lath bonding procedures on both rear and front curtains, and then in both cases used this kind of technique to wrap the curtains around the rollers. What I did was I got a piece of I cut a piece of paper and curled it around so it would thread between these two rollers conveniently, and then used a little piece of magic tape. I actually cut a few millimeters off that rear curtain, so I think it ended up being about 76 millimeters rather than the 80 I made it originally. I could then pull the paper. It's a lot easier to thread the paper through than this rubberized silk, and also it gave me something to pull on to tension the curtain as I bonded the curtain to the roller. So that's the way it's going to go. Once I've positioned it, then I can take the paper off and finish the job. But again, I did this in multiple steps. The first step was to just hold the rear curtain tensioned against the lath and the ribbons with my index finger there, and I just drew a line of Super X adhesive between the rubberized surface of the rear curtain and the brass roller you see here. Sorry, the exposure and the focus isn't exactly perfect, but I think you get the idea. I'm just putting a line of Super X adhesive on, and then that will hold it in the correct position. I can then come back later, remove the tape and the paper, and finish the job by bonding the rest of the curtain onto the brass roller. So I've just folded it over again. I'm tensioning it, and actually right now I'm looking around for something convenient to hold it in place, which turned out to be my trusty eraser, again. So I just push that eraser in there. I'm sure there's better ways of doing this, but it's the first time I've done this job, and this is what came to mind. So I just push the eraser in there, maintaining some tension, and then use the weight of the frame of the camera to maintain a bit of tension on that roller to keep it to keep the curtain tight and straight. So once I'd done that to both curtains, they were in the right position, and I tensioned the rear roller, and then set about reassembling the camera. It's quite a daunting task, but I went back to the videos that I relied on for the disassembly, and was able to reassemble the camera. But once I reassembled it, while the curtains appeared to be working fine, and they were firing, they weren't firing at the right speeds, and there were one or two other concerns I had with the build. So I decided to go back to my trusty professional camera repairman for a full CLA after this, and Youxin Ye up in Massachusetts did a great job. He actually was happy with the work I'd done on the shutter curtains, so he didn't replace those, but he did do a full CLA, replaced the splitter, adjusted the brake, and got all the speeds working correctly. So here you can see my curtains in the camera I've just got back from Youxin Ye. That's set to 1,000th of a second right here. I'll just shoot this off, and you'll see I actually loaded an exposed film in there, so on some of the slower speeds you might see the emulsion of the film. That was rather too fast at 1,000th of a second. Going down to some of the slower speeds, we'll see it a bit better. Yeah, that was probably a quarter of a second. Now the rangefinder is working great, nice and bright. All the speeds are working fine, and I'm now the proud owner of a CLA'd Leica III F with my own shutter curtains in there.